Hello, everyone, and welcome to our sixth Climate Strike webinar. My name is Paula. I'm active in the Climate Strike Basel, and I will be moderating our discussion today with Mathilde. Why don't you introduce yourself briefly?
Hi,
Hello,
my name is Mathilde.
Welcome to our sixth Climate Strike webinar.
I'm also active in the Climate Strike Basel, and I'm looking forward to our webinar today.
Thank you. So today we have a special guest with us, and we'll be talking about the struggle for the access to safe water and the fight for water as a fundamental right. Joining us today is Gina Luster. She will be giving us an input about the water crisis in Flint and the organization she founded with two friends, Flint Rising. Then we will have time to ask her some questions. It will be great if you could help us and write any questions you have in the comments. We will try to include the questions into the discussion. Great, so let's get started. I will hand it over to you now, Gina.
Hi, my name is Gina Luster. I'm an organizer with Flint Rising here in Flint, Michigan. We kind of got started back in 2016 after the water crisis began here in Flint. And Flint Rising was started with two of my friends, Naira Sharif and Melissa Mays. And it's just three of us. But we've really tried to be a resource hub for the residents of Flint on what's going on with, of course, the Flint water crisis. But not only that, also different types of environmental injustices and civil rights injustices. We started because we realized and found out that there was a section of Flint here that has about 6,000 or 7,000 people in it. We call them wards. And they had no idea about the Flint water crisis because they were undocumented. And so we did a canvass and went door to door and kind of tried to bring them abreast on what was going on with the Flint water crisis. And from there, we've just been doing what we can around the world to help out with different organizations and different causes.
Thank you. Could you explain to us what happened in Flint? What is the Flint water crisis?
I guess now the world should know, if they don't already know, what happened in Flint. What happened in Flint was very unique and different. It wasn't something that was caused by Mother Nature or anything like that. What happened in Flint was caused by really multiple things. The first thing was here in the United States, our infrastructure is really outdated. Flint's infrastructure has been around 50 plus, well, actually about 100 years. Our infrastructure is way outdated. Once we began digging up pipes, we found wooden pipes. I didn't even know wooden pipes existed. So that just goes to show how outdated our infrastructure was. And the second reason was because of greed and elected politicians here trying to save money, and also trying to privatize our water. So it really wasn't one particular thing. There were multiple things, but the main issue was greed, trying to save money, and the fact that the infrastructure was so outdated that there was really nothing we could do. They decided to bring in an emergency manager into Flint because they said that Flint wasn't being a profitable city. And this was back in 2012, 13, I believe. So Flint had about 4 different emergency managers. An emergency manager made the decision to switch our water from the Detroit water system. We had been receiving our water from Detroit for probably 40 years, and the contract had ended. And so Detroit was ready to renegotiate, and the emergency managers here in Flint decided they didn't want to renegotiate a contract with Detroit. They wanted to build a pipeline so that we could access our own water right here from the Flint River, which was a very bad mistake. On surface, it sounds good, to use your own water, but when the water is river water that's stagnant, it's going to take a lot of cleaning. And that is where the problem came in. Once they switched Flint from Detroit to the Flint River water, there was some things that you have to put in the water to reassure that the water is clean enough for human consumption. And it costs about $100 per household here in Flint. Flint has roughly 90,000 residents. So it would have cost $100 per household to put the proper treatment into the water so that we could drink the Detroit River water. But because the emergency manager was here to, quote unquote, save money and make us financially responsible, they made the decision, along with the governor of Michigan at the time, his name was Rick Snyder. They made the decision not to add the corrosion control into the water. So when they made the switch on April 25th of 2014, that day, Flint residents were drinking poisoned water. It happened immediately. And when you don't put corrosion control into the water and your infrastructure is already weak and compromised, what happens is the pipes erode in seconds and it's coming through your water source. So once that was done, it's like opening the Pandora's box. You can't close it back because now you've gotten every pipeline in the city is now contaminated. And just a little background on pipes and how corrosion control works. In your water pipes that are underground, there are certain chemicals that they push through to not only clean the water, but it also puts a special coating inside of the pipes. So when you don't add that coating is not there, or whatever coating that was there, it's eaten away. And that's what happened to Flint. So I hope that kind of gives a little background on pipes and how this works. So when they did the switch on April 25th, like I said, immediately our pipes started eroding. People came home from work that afternoon and were taking pictures of their water from their faucets in their kitchens, and the water was brown and it smelled like sewage. I actually have some samples from 6 years ago when I came home that day, and I got some of the water and put it into bottles. Hold on one second. I'm going to go grab one. Excuse me.
And that was tap water coming out of your taps?
Yes. And this is 6 years later, and it's still brown in this bottle. Here's another one. And up close, you can actually see parts of the pipe, the infrastructure in the water. It looks like little bitty speckles of rust, but actually it's the actual pipe that deteriorated and came through our faucets. And the smell was just terrible. So that was kind of the first time that the residents of Flint knew that there was definitely a problem. And from that point on, it was an uphill battle and fight with our government here, not only on the local level, but on the state and federal level as well. We had to make multiple trips to Washington, D.C. At the time, President Obama was in office, and he tried to work with us Flint residents. We actually went to the White House and spoke with him and the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. And he also came to Flint and spoke with us here as well. And a lot of people remember he came to Flint and he drank the water. That was the soundbite that all of the news media, international news media, put out. But he wasn't drinking Flint water. He was actually drinking filtered water. So, but yeah, a lot of people ask me about that. Well, didn't President Obama drink the water? No, he didn't drink what I just showed you. He probably wouldn't be here right now alive if he drank this. So, but once we found out that the water was contaminated, then it was an issue of trying to figure out what it was contaminated with. And so after reaching out to people like Erin Brockovich, who had did this years ago in the U.S., we reached out to her, and we reached out to Dr. Mark Edwards, which is a professor here in the U.S., and we found out that we were pretty much poisoned with not only lead, but all types of other harsh chemicals. Some of the chemicals that we were poisoned with are actually worse than lead, believe it or not. All types of TTHMs. There's a long list. So a lot of the people and residents here in Flint are not only battling lead poisoning, we've also had about 16, 17 deaths where people actually died from Legionnaire's disease, which is something that most folks don't even know about. It's not normal to have Legionnaire's disease inside of your water infrastructure. And we also had a lot of people dying from cancer. The cancer rate shot up tremendously in the last 6 years. We're actually approaching the anniversary date of the water crisis. Like I said, it's April 25th, so it's coming up. And that's why I thought this was so awesome to team up with you guys. And I was supposed to be there in person, but of course, with what's going on with COVID-19, that didn't turn out. But I'm looking forward to not only myself, but a few other folks here, including my daughter. She'll be turning 12 on the 25th, which is the date of the anniversary. And so she's been very involved in this with the youth, the younger kids. But we look forward to hopefully when this ban is lifted, that we can come and be there in person and share our stories, and also share some of the actions that we had to take to make the changes that we've had here in Flint. We had to get a lot of legislation changed and laws and help write bills. So it's really been it's been a long journey, but we have some accomplishments that we've gotten along the way, and we still have a lot more that we need to get accomplished to make sure that not only Flint, but that the world has free, I say free, or affordable drinking water. For me, water is not something that you should have to pay for. It flows freely, you know, and if it's clean and if we're taking care of the environment like we're supposed to, we should be able to see a river or a stream and stick our cup in there and drink from that river or spring without being worried about dying afterwards. So that's pretty much how Flint Rising got started. And basically, you know, a lot of what we do is person to person, one-on-one contact with residents who have been affected or have not been affected, that just want to learn more about the environment and how the branches of government work so that you know who to go to when you have a problem with your water or your air or even civil rights. We have some issues with that as well. Some people seem to think that the water crisis was done here in Flint because Flint is a majority minority city, just like Detroit. So Detroit and Flint share some of the same problems. People not having access to water. There's over 2,000 homes at one time that did not have running water at their home because they could not afford it. The United States, we have some of the highest, well, Flint actually has the highest water rates in the US. But the US, there's a lot of other states that have really high water rates, but Flint has the highest. So for it to be a city that has a 43% poverty rate, we have the highest water bills, which doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. So, but if there's any questions, I'll be free to answer those.
I have a couple questions. So earlier you mentioned greed, and you mentioned politicians that Flint wasn't profitable enough, and then politicians trying to privatize water. So could you explain to us why is water privatization so detrimental to people? Maybe with the example of Flint. You're on mute, sorry.
Okay, there it goes. Well, one of the things is when you privatize water, you can't control how much you're going to pay for it because it's now into one person or one group's hands, and they decide what you will pay for the water. It no longer belongs to us. It then belongs to them and that one group or one person or one entity. So that's one of the main reasons water privatization is an issue. And then not only that, when it's privatized, look what happened to Flint. People make bad decisions. The decisions are up to one or two people, and now we have people that are dead. So not only is it not affordable, but it's never good to have anything where one or two people make the final decision for a whole city or country. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. You mentioned earlier as well that what you do at Flint Rising is you go to the people and you inform them on many different things. Does that mean, that there is the need for a group, a movement to do this informing? You'd think that would be the job of somehow of the government. Could you explain if there has been any opportunity, not opportunity, but options to get that information from the government?
Here in Flint, we had to actually take our government to court. We had to force them to even recognize that it was a problem. They denied that there was an issue. They told us that we were crazy U.S. soccer moms and mother bears, and that we weren't seeing what we were seeing. And we're like, we're seeing this water is brown. It looks like liquor coming out of our faucets. What do you mean it's not a problem? And so we actually had to sue our government, and we're still in the middle of a lawsuit. We're suing the state of Michigan. We found out that they knew about it before we did, and that they tried to cover it up. We actually had to hire the ACLU here in the U.S. to represent the residents of Flint. And my coworker, Melissa Mays, is actually one of the lead complainants on the lawsuit. She was kind of one of the whistleblowers in this because her and her children, they started getting sick immediately. They started having seizures and headaches and stomach aches and losing their hair, and vision got bad. So one of the things, you're right, your government should be here to protect you. And, the EPA is something that's here, and it's Environmental Protection Agency, but they didn't protect our environment. Wow. But we got some ground, and we basically forced the lady who was over the EPA at that time, she resigned. We voted the governor out who had started this. We got rid of him. And we have I think we ended up prosecuting about 15 defendants. So you basically, we had to fight. We really did. We had to fight for the steps that we have accomplished. We accomplished getting water stations set up around the city of Flint, where residents could come and drive their car up, and there were people there that would load your car up with cases of water. We also went up to the Nestle plant. Nestle has a plant right here in Michigan, about 2 hours away from Flint. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with Michael Moore. He makes all these movies. He's actually a Flint resident. So we teamed up with him and we went to the Nestle factory, and we demanded that Nestle give us some answers, because Nestle is pumping the water that they sell across the world right here in my backyard for $200 a year. And I have people that come into my office that have water bills that are $5,000, and they're pumping this water and selling it back to us, which is the craziest thing ever. So Nestle was one of our main enemies here, as far as we saw what they were not just doing here, but we learned what they were doing across the world. There where you guys are, I went to Nigeria last year, same thing there. They have this big plant, and it's literally walking distance from a village that has no running water. So yeah, we've learned here that if you want to get something done, the best thing to do is what you guys are doing. Team up with people who have like minds, and go after the elected officials and the politicians that aren't doing what they were elected to do, which is protect and serve.
Thank you very much. You answered a question from the comments that the role of Nestle and Flint. Do you have anything to add to that? Yeah, we had a question from someone. The role of Nestle and Flint. I mean, you already said quite a lot. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Only thing I would probably want to add is Nestle played a big part in the Flint water crisis. Because of course, as you can see now, they're profiting the most off of the Flint water crisis, because we can no longer drink from our taps. And Nestle owns majority of all of the bottled water that you see. So it's a money bag for them. And the bondholders are as well. There's a lot of bondholders that have their hands in the pot as well. And they are friends with the Nestle Corporation. So they play a very big part in what's going on here. We're actually now, we've kind of forced them to donate water to Flint. So we do have some Nestle water that is being donated by them. I think they donate about 20,000 cases a month or something like that. So there is some free water, bottled water available, but it's donated back to us for free because we refuse to buy something that belonged to us in the first place. It just doesn't make any sense to do that.
You often say we. When you speak of we, do you mean Flint Rising, or do you mean who's involved in this we?
Yes, a lot of times when I say we, it's Flint Rising, but also we teamed up with a number of other organizations across the world. Like I said, we have a lot of groups here in Flint and Detroit. Another one group is called We the People, and they're out of Detroit because Detroit had a big issue with water before Flint. Their water, because of the high water rates, there were thousands of residents in the city of Detroit who didn't have running water for years. I mean, years. So we teamed up with We the People. But there's actually two. There's one that's We the People of Detroit and just We the People. They're both, we call them water warriors. We even teamed up with some of the water buffaloes that we met in Standing Rock. So many in Boston, Massachusetts, here in the United States. We team up with a foundation there called Corporate Accountability. And they went, their claim to fame is they went after Nestle for the baby formula they were producing over in South America and Africa and third world countries. And they also were really, I think they were the only ones at the time that went after the big tobacco companies. So we work really close with them, and we work close with Center for Public Democracy. They're here as well, but we work with a lot of organizations. We call it a rainbow coalition of us now. We work with the Poor People's Campaign, which was kind of started back in the civil rights days with Dr. Martin Luther King and folks like that. So we have teamed up. There's a lot of organizations that have come into place since this worldwide water problem has really got on the people's radar in the past 10, 15 years.
Thank you. We have a question from the comments. Do you do other things than taking them to courts? So what do you do as an organization? I think that means what do you do as an organization? What have you achieved so far?
We do a lot of court. We're in court a lot. But besides that, one of our main goals is to get the word out. And we do a lot of actions. We pop up at their homes, their jobs, their tea hours, their parties. They throw all these fancy parties, the Nestle Corporation, and they'll invite all of these elected officials and lobbyists, and some kind of way we hear about it, and we try to show up and make a presence and let them know that we have not forgotten and will not forget, and we will stay on their case until we have the justice that we deserve. We did all types of actions. One of the main ones that we did in the very beginning is we went to the water plant here because our water plant is outdated. It hasn't been updated in over 40 years, I believe. So we did a die-in at our water plant. And if you go on the Flint Rising page, we have a Facebook page and website, and you can see some of the pictures and videos from some of the actions we've taken. But we did a die-in. We put on these white hazmat suits, and we got red paint, and we put the red paint in different parts on the suits that had affected our bodies. We might have a splash by a breast for the women who have suffered breast cancer, or a splash of red in your abdomen area for the women who have had miscarriages and things of that nature. So that was one of the really big ones. I think a lot of international news covered that. We did the die-in, and we've marched on Washington. We've protested at the White House. I've actually been arrested at the White House fighting for not just clean water, but I was also there fighting for health care for all. And this was around the Affordable Care Act time. So we do a lot of community meetings because things are updated here every second. I'm actually now on this webinar with you guys, and I have 2 cell phones where I'm trying to keep up with what's going on here in Flint. So things change, and that's one of the things that we've learned. And the reason why we've been so successful is because as soon as we find out about something, and usually how we find out is because we're so adamant about going to our capital, and we have established relationships with what I call the good guys, some of the good guys that are elected officials. Everyone who's an elected official is not a bad person, but it took us years to find some good ones, and we got some that elected into office that are allies with us. And so we pretty much know what's going on the state level, almost in real time. And so as soon as we find out, we make sure that the community knows. And we've been successful that way with just really being adamant about staying informed, knowing what resources are available, knowing when our elected officials are meeting, knowing which bills they're working on, which bills they should be working on, what type of legislation we need to change to make it better for residents, and things like that. And of course, the actions. The actions have really been successful for us. No one likes it when they're putting their kids off to school in the morning and you got 40 people with signs in their driveway. That kind of gets your attention, and their neighbors really hate it. So we've been really successful with that, and inserting ourselves into their meetings. Most of the meetings that elected officials have are protected by the Public Meetings Act, the Open Act. So they have to let you into a lot of these meetings. And what they do is they try to do them in secret because they know if you find out, you'll show up. So it's a lot of restless nights trying to keep up with them, and jumping on airplanes and buses and carpooling to different meetings and events when these CEOs and politicians get together. And I think that's what has really been a plus for us and our success, is to show up and show out.
Thank you. Could you tell us about your main goal, or what you'd like to achieve in the future with Flint Rising, if you have a main goal?
Well, when we started, we had one goal, and that was to have clean, affordable drinking water. Um, show you. We had 3 demands. That's just got my telephone number on it. But this is the front of our business card. And this is also our logo that we have on all of our posters. Excuse me, I have allergies. And this is the back. And these are our demands. And so those are our 3 main goals. Well, that's what they started off being. But now, like I said, we've kind of really dipped over into environmental justice and climate change and all of these things that we found out over the past 6 years. They all tie into one another. You can't really just separate water and not talk about climate. You can't talk about water and not talk about infrastructure. So, and you can't talk about water, infrastructure, or climate or the environment without talking about civil rights. So right now, I say our 3 goals are still these things, but we also feel that people should be treated fairly. And when I say fairly, I mean there's no reason why anyone should have a $5,000 US water bill. I mean, come on. You can buy a car with that, you know. There's no reason why a city should still have wooden pipes as infrastructure. I always say, who have we elected and what were they doing while they were in office? You know, so our goal is to not only help with water, but the environment and all types of other and social justice. We've worked with Black Lives Matter. We went to the Women's March in Washington, D.C., and we marched there. So not to say we do everything, but our goals are what other grassroots goals are. I guess that's a fair way to state that.
You mentioned climate change and how it affects your fight for water, and that you cannot fight for water without it being intertwined with the big subject of climate change. Could you explain maybe how that kind of how that has
I understand. Well, we have a lot of elected officials, not only here in the US, but in other countries that don't believe in climate change, which is a problem. That's a major problem. And from what I've learned during this Flint water crisis about climate changes, I've learned about acid rain and how that affects your soil and infrastructure and just your health in general. I've learned so much about how climate change affects the connection with how I'm trying to say it and not sound like it's, just health disparities. We have a lot of health disparities. I mean, when the climate changes, your skin changes, your hair changes, your mood changes. It even affects your mental state. So we've learned so much, and we learned about how, when you take a hot shower, if the water isn't clean, whatever is in that water, the vapors, the steam, it intensifies whatever is wrong in that water. And same thing when you go outside. If it's a really hot day in Flint, they tell us now to, don't leave your water bottles in your car or on your patio, because the sun can affect the plastic, which can affect the water that you're drinking. So it's so intertwined. It's amazing. For me, being born in the 70s and learning this now in 2000s is amazing to me. So you guys probably know a lot more about climate than I do, but I've definitely learned that those things kind of go hand in hand, and you got to know a little about one in order to understand the other.
Thank you. We have a question here in the comments. Nestle is a Swiss-based transnational corporation. Do you think that the example of Flint could be important in any way to Switzerland?
Definitely. Last year, was that 2018? No, 2000. Yeah, last year, I actually was on a kind of a call sort of like this when Nestle and Veolia had their shareholders meeting. And all of the international media was on that webinar call, and we kind of affected the way their shareholders felt about them once we told what happened here in Flint and what had happened in some other cities here in the U.S., as well as what we discovered happened in Nigeria. So Veolia and Nestle are really, every type of litigation that we filed here in this Flint water crisis, some kind of way has their name involved in it. So it's very important because these guys are trying to privatize water across the world. They want to monopolize the water and privatize it everywhere. And that's really scary if you think about it, to let one corporation own all of the world's water and control it. Not good at all.
Yeah, I have one more question. You mentioned in the very beginning that Obama came and he declared a national emergency, if I remember that correctly. And
Actually, he didn't.
He didn't? Sorry.
No, because that's where we were hoping that when he came that he would, because if he would have did that, we would have been able to, Army Corps of Engineers, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but basically the Army Corps of Engineers could have came into Flint and changed the infrastructure. Our pipes would be fixed now. So we were kind of waiting on that, and it didn't quite happen the way we would like. But we'll see. We'll see.
So you'd say that what was the governmental response to the crisis? Governmental, regional, local government, and also federal?
The local government at the time, we had a different mayor. That mayor is no longer in office, but like I said, their initial response was to deny it. They didn't want to deal with it at all. But we wouldn't let them deny it. We showed up everywhere. We even probably showed up at some of their kids' schools. I mean, we had to FOIA their emails, and like I said, the ACLU, we had to kind of bring them in to help us, because they basically denied it. They lied and said that there was nothing going on and it was all in our minds and we were crazy. So, and as far as on the state and federal level, it took a while. It took us literally going to Washington, D.C. and kind of knocking on the doors and saying, hey, you have a whole town a whole city that has been poisoned and we need help. And so one of the things President Obama did before he left office is he left some federal dollars for Flint, specifically for water and infrastructure. So that was a good thing. And it's just been a really it's been a daily struggle, even with the new governor that we have now. And of course, we have a new president. Donald Trump has not mentioned Flint since he's been in office. So that's one of the places that Flint Rising is really looking forward to going when this ban is lifted, because it's going to be campaign time for Mr. Trump. And how dare you campaign? And he better not say the word infrastructure. Because if he does, and when he does, Flint residents are going to go on full beast mode on him, because you haven't been here, you haven't mentioned Flint, and you're now been in office 3 years, going on 4 years. His term is almost ending. So it's been a real struggle. We have to keep the word out because our politicians will not. And one of the things the last mayor of Flint did, her name was Dr. Karen Williams Weaver. Not only was she the first woman to be a mayor here in Flint, she was the first African-American woman. So one of the things she did while she was in office is she had a way with herself about the media really loved her. She would be on Fox News, Al Jazeera, CNN, MSNBC, and she kind of kept the word out with the entertainment community. We've had Will Smith, Jada Pinkett Smith, their son provides water to Flint. He has his water boxes set up here. Beyonce and her husband donated money to Flint. So one of the things that the former mayor did was she was able to reach out to not just the news media, but also to the entertainment world. And with a lot of the donations and support that we got were from her doing those things. Cher tweeted about me personally. She said, you know, I'm watching this Flint thing and there's this girl on there and I'm getting calls like, Cher's talking about you on her Twitter. I'm like, you know. So I think that was really exciting, but that was something special to get the entertainment industry to really come in and donate millions of dollars to Flint and the Flint youth. Elon Musk, he's known for his Tesla cars. He has really been a really good ally with Flint residents. He's donated water filters and computers, the Google Chromebooks, so to the Flint students. And it came in handy because now we can't go to school and my daughter's actually upstairs doing her homework on some of those donated laptops and computers. So I think that's one thing I think that's very important is to have allies. You have to have some type of relationships with not just elected officials, but you need relationships with media. It's been really resourceful that I can pick up the phone and kind of call journalists. And, you know, Netflix has did a series about us, PBS, Public Broadcasting Service, Norman Lear, just so many people that have really kept bringing and helped keep Flint in the media and in the news. And as long as it's staying in the forefront, even though it may not be as fast as we want to see change, we're seeing change on a daily basis. And that's big because at one while we were seeing no change. We were actually regressing backwards. So it's really beneficial to have those special relationships. And I look forward to whoever is watching this now to build relationships. And I'm very reachable and approachable. So it's about building relationships and working together and networking. You cannot do this alone. One organization, one foundation, one person just cannot do this alone. You have to have support in numbers, and you have to have some really smart and strategic people to go up against this crazy machine that we're going up against.
Thank you. You put that very nicely. We have one last question here from the comments. You told me a week ago that you were crazy busy because of this COVID-19 pandemic going on right now. And the question was how the pandemic is affecting Flint.
For Flint, it's almost like we got the double whammy. We were still dealing with poison water, and now we have poison air. I can't go outside without a mask on now. We have curfews. There's nothing open but gas stations and grocery stores and pharmacies, and they close really early. And so we're kind of dealing with two things now. It's really difficult now since the COVID-19 started for us to go out and access clean water because that's an all-day event. You have to go out and stand in these lines that are sometimes 5 and 6 and 10 miles long just to get 2 cases of water. So with this stay-at-home ban, it's stay-in-place ban, stay-at-home ban, it's really made our water crisis issue even more escalated and more important to show that, once again, even with the COVID-19, it's infecting our environment. We don't know how this is going to affect our trees and grass and soil and animals. So it's really been scary for us Flint residents because we have to wash our hands. That's the one way you can prevent from getting the virus, but we have dirty water. Our water is not clean to begin with. And we do have some filters, but the one thing about the faucet filters are you can't run hot water through the filters. If you run hot water through the filters, it destroys the filters. So when I wash my hands, because I've been out in the community and I want to protect myself from COVID-19, I have to literally wash my hands with Flint water, and I have really no idea what's in the water. So it's like, I can wash my hands and that might kill me, but I know for sure if I don't wash my hands, that COVID-19 could kill me. So we have a really big problem here. It's scary for us.
Thanks, Gina, for being here and telling about water in Flint. And thanks for listening to our webinar. I hope you enjoyed it.
Do you have any final words you'd like to say, Gina, to finish it out?
Yes, I hope this has been informative. And I also hope to learn more about what you guys, the work that you guys are doing. I'm very interested about the work that you do. I've heard a lot of good things about what you guys are doing over there. And I brag about you guys a lot to the Flint Water Warriors. And they're so amazed when I tell them how old you guys are. I'm like, these are kids, you know? And so I'm very thankful for the work that you guys are doing. And I look forward to partnering up and helping out with whatever you may do in the future. And don't forget about Flint.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming, Gina. And yeah, it was great. So thank you for everyone that was watching. And yeah, we have many, the Climate Strike has many webinars every week. So if you want to know more about what we do, then you can listen into those. So thank you.
Yes, and feel free to invite me whenever you like. I'm home.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.